My name is Denise, and I'm 34 years old. I stood in my husband Mark's corner office, his mahogany desk between us like a battlefield. He leaned back in his CEO chair, pointing toward his secretary. Apologise to Stephanie. Now. 8 years of marriage, and he wanted me to apologise to his 24-year-old girlfriend for being rude. The promotion letter from the board burned in my pocket. He had no idea what was coming. Before I share how I destroyed his empire from within, tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most. Let's dive into how I turned humiliation into the sweetest victory. 6 months before that confrontation, my life appeared perfect. I had worked my way up from junior marketing associate to marketing director at one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech companies. The journey hadn't been easy. Fresh out of Northwestern with my MBA, I started at the bottom, fetching coffee and organizing files. But I had determination that couldn't be crushed. Mark entered my life when he was vice president of operations. I was a team lead, then running a small but efficient group of 5 marketers. He pursued me with the intensity of a man who knew what he wanted. Flowers appeared on my desk every Monday. He'd wait by my car after late nights, ensuring I got home safely. He spoke about partnership, about building an empire together. "You're brilliant, Denise," he'd say, his green eyes intense. Together we could run this company. Our wedding was featured in Chicago Business Weekly. The power couple, they called us. Mark had just been promoted to CEO youngest in the company's history at 38. I stood beside him at every company event, the supportive wife, who also happened to be crushing every marketing goal set before me. The first year was everything I'd dreamed. We'd discuss strategy over breakfast, debate market trends during dinner. He valued my opinion, or so I thought. The respect from other employees felt genuine. They saw us as equals, 2 forces driving the company toward unprecedented success. 3 major campaigns under my leadership brought in $50 million in new revenue. The Patterson Industries rebrand alone generated $12 million in the first quarter. The board noticed. Chairman Roberts himself pulled me aside at the company gala. "You're the real asset here, Denise. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I smiled, thinking he meant it as a compliment to both Mark and me. How naive I was. The changes started small. Mark's late meetings increased from once a week to nearly every night. His phone, once carelessly left anywhere, never left his side. When I asked about his schedule, he'd wave me off. "CEO responsibilities, honey. You wouldn't understand the pressure." Wouldn't understand I was managing 40% of the company's revenue stream. Then Stephanie arrived. Fresh from State College with a communications degree, and ambitions that exceeded her experience. Mark hired her personally, bypassing HR's usual rigorous screening process. She started as his secretary, all bright smiles and short skirts. "She reminds me of you when you were younger," Mark said one evening, not realizing the insult embedded in his comparison. Younger, hungrier, more eager to please. I watched her study me during meetings, copying my presentation style, my hand gestures, even ordering the same lunch. Imitation might be flattery, but this felt like something else, like she was learning my role to replace me. The lipstick on Mark's collar came first. Ruby red, nothing like my nude preferences. He claimed a client's wife got emotional during a meeting, hugged him in gratitude. The perfume followed something floral and young clinging to his jacket. Another excuse, another client, another lie I pretended to believe. Our employees noticed before I admitted it to myself. Conversations halted when I entered the break room. Sympathetic glances followed me down the hallways. The pity was almost worse than the betrayal itself. One evening, I attempted a confrontation. Mark was scrolling through his phone, smiling at something. "Who are you texting?" "Work stuff." At 11 p.m., he looked up, his expression shifting to irritation. "Are you seriously questioning me after everything I've done for your career?" "My career? I built my success myself." "In my company. Don't forget who signs your checks, Denise." His company, not ours. The mask was slipping, revealing the man I'd married, or perhaps revealing him for the first time. I spent that night in our guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering when love had transformed into a power struggle, when partnership became ownership, when Stephanie became more important than 8 years of marriage. But I wasn't the type to crumble. I'd fought for everything I'd achieved, and I'd fight for this too. I just needed to be smart about it. The next morning, I smiled at Mark over coffee, kissed his cheek before he left for work. He seemed relieved, probably thinking I'd accepted my place. He had no idea I was just beginning to document everything, building a case that would destroy the empire he thought belonged solely to him. 3 months before the ultimate confrontation, the truth became impossible to ignore. Stephanie had grown bold, her confidence fed by Mark's obvious favoritism. She'd perch on his desk during meetings, her legs crossed strategically, laughing too loud at his mediocre jokes. The other executives noticed their discomfort palpable, but no one dared speak against the CEO's pet. Brad from IT knocked on my office door one Tuesday afternoon. He closed it behind him, unusual for our typically casual interactions. "Denise, I shouldn't be telling you this." He started wringing his hands. "But you've always been good to my team." "What is it, Brad?" There's been unusual email activity, lots of deleted messages between Mark and Stephanie. They're using company servers for personal correspondence. My stomach clenched, but I maintained composure. "Can you recover them?" "Not without authorization, but I've noticed irregular patterns. Late-night access from both accounts simultaneously from the same IP address. The same location. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore." I thanked Brad, promising discretion. That evening, I discovered hotel charges on Mark's company credit card. The Ritz-Carlton every Thursday afternoon. Business meetings, the expense reports claimed. The same hotel where Stephanie tagged herself on Instagram, posting photos of champagne and city views. The promotion happened without warning. An email announcement: Stephanie was now executive assistant to the CEO, a newly created position with a salary that exceeded most directors. HR hadn't been consulted. Policy hadn't been followed. Mark had simply decided, and everyone pretended it was normal. She started attending board meetings sitting where I used to sit. During a crucial strategy session about our Asian market expansion, she interrupted my presentation. "I think what Mark really wants to see is a more aggressive approach," she said, flipping her blonde hair. "I'm presenting the strategy Mark and I developed together." I responded calmly. "Well, he mentioned to me last night that he wanted changes." Last night. She didn't even pretend anymore. Mark nodded. "Stephanie has a point. Let's pivot to her suggestions." Her suggestions were my ideas from a private document I'd shared with Mark weeks ago. He'd given her my work, let her present it as her own. The other executives shifted uncomfortably, but no one challenged him. My office relocation notice arrived the next day. The corner office with windows overlooking the lake was needed for executive restructuring. My new space was half the size interior next to the supply closet. A demotion disguised as reorganization. The breaking point came when I found the photos. Mark had forgotten we shared a cloud storage account set up years ago for convenience. There they were intimate pictures of him and Stephanie date-stamped from the past 3 months. In our bed, in his office, in the company retreat cabin meant for executive planning sessions. I screenshot everything, forwarding copies to my personal attorney and a secure external drive. Evidence was mounting, but I needed more than proof of infidelity. I needed leverage. Mark's manipulation escalated at the quarterly board meeting. While I presented our numbers, he interrupted constantly. "Denise seems to be struggling with work-life balance," he told the board. "Perhaps we should redistribute some of her responsibilities." "My departments exceeded targets by 30%, I countered, through aggressive tactics that stressed the team, he claimed. "Stephanie has been fielding complaints." Lies. My team satisfaction scores were the highest in the company, but Stephanie nodded earnestly, playing the concerned colleague perfectly. An anonymous tip arrived in my personal email that evening. The night security guard had included footage from the parking garage. Mark and Stephanie, explicit enough to end careers. The timestamp showed it occurred during what Mark had told me was an emergency investor call. The guard's message was simple: "You deserve better. This is just one of many. Many." How many people knew? How many watched my humiliation in silence? The final insult came when Mark announced Stephanie would co-lead my upcoming project with Morrison Electronics, our biggest potential client. The project I'd cultivated for 6 months, built from nothing but an idea and determination. "She needs the experience," Mark explained in front of my entire team, "and you could benefit from her fresh perspective." Fresh, young, everything I apparently wasn't anymore. That night, Mark didn't come home until 3 a.m. He slipped into bed reeking of her perfume and had the audacity to drape his arm over me. I lay still, playing the oblivious wife while planning my revenge. The next morning, I accessed Mark's home computer while he showered. His arrogance made him sloppy with passwords. There I found drafted divorce papers dated 2 months out. He planned to claim I'd abandoned my marriage for my career, painting himself as the victim. Half of my earned assets would go to him under our prenup unless I could prove fault. But the most devastating discovery was an email to Stephanie. Once Denise is gone, the marketing director position is yours. The board will approve whatever I recommend. My position, my blood, sweat, and tears. Promised to a girl who couldn't spell strategy without autocorrect. I printed everything, adding it to my growing collection. Then I made a decision. I wouldn't be the victim in this story. I wouldn't leave quietly, tail between my legs, while they celebrated on my grave. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing smart. 1 month before everything exploded, the Johnson Industries presentation arrived. A $100 million opportunity that could define the company's next 5 years. I'd spent 3 months cultivating the relationship with their procurement team, understanding their needs, crafting the perfect proposal. This was my masterpiece, my proof that I was indispensable. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early to do final prep. My slides were perfect, each transition smooth, every statistic double-checked. But when I opened the presentation file, my stomach dropped. Everything had been changed. My carefully crafted slides were replaced with amateur graphics and typo-riddled content. Stephanie's digital fingerprints were everywhere in the file's edit history. Mark walked in with her at his side, both looking pleased with themselves. "We made some improvements last night," he said casually. "Stephanie had brilliant ideas." "You destroyed 3 months of work," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "We enhanced it," Stephanie chirped. "Made it more dynamic." Dynamic? It looked like a high school project. With no time to fix anything, we walked into the conference room where Johnson Industries' team waited. 5 executives, including their CEO, Margaret Johnson, a woman I'd carefully built rapport with over several lunches. I started the presentation, trying to salvage what I could through verbal adjustments. But every time I gained momentum, Stephanie interrupted. "What Denise means to say is..." She'd begin, then completely contradict my point. Mark supported every interruption. "Stephanie's right. Let's focus on her approach." Her approach was scattered, uninformed, and clearly improvised. Margaret Johnson's expression grew increasingly puzzled. During a break, she pulled me aside. "Denise, this isn't the proposal we discussed. What's happening here?" "Technical difficulties." I lied, protecting the company's reputation even as mine burned. The meeting concluded with a polite, "We'll be in touch." We'd lost it. I knew it. Mark knew it. But in the elevator, he turned on me. "You sabotaged that presentation because you can't handle sharing credit," he accused. I sabotaged it. "She destroyed 3 months of my work." "Our work," Stephanie corrected. "Mark told me this was a collaborative effort." "You weren't even employed when I started this project." Mark's face darkened. "This attitude is exactly why you're struggling, Denise. You can't accept that others might have better ideas." Better ideas. From someone who thought ROI meant return of investment. Back at the office, Mark called an emergency meeting with the entire marketing department. 23 people gathered in the main conference room, confusion evident on their faces. "We need to address the elephant in the room," Mark began. "Denise's hostility towards Stephanie is affecting team performance. It's created a toxic environment." My team looked shocked. Several started to speak up, but Mark silenced them with a raised hand. "Denise, you owe Stephanie an apology. Here, now, in front of everyone." The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. Some sympathetic, others uncomfortable, a few recording on their phones thinking they were subtle. Stephanie stood next to Mark, her expression a masterclass in fake concern with an underlying smirk she couldn't quite hide. "I'm waiting, so," Mark said. This was it. The ultimate power play. Humiliate me publicly, establish Stephanie's dominance, break my spirit completely. I looked at my team, people I'd mentored, fought for, protected from corporate politics. They deserve better than this circus. I stood smoothing my dress and walked to face Stephanie directly. "Stephanie," I began, my voice clear and professional. "I apologize if my experience and expertise have made you feel inadequate. I'm sorry if my success highlights your shortcomings. And I deeply regret that you felt the need to destroy my work because you couldn't create anything original yourself." Her face flushed red. Mark stepped forward, furious. "That's not an apology." "It's the only one she's getting," I replied, then addressed my team. "I apologize to all of you for this unprofessional display. You deserve leadership that respects your intelligence." I walked out, leaving chaos behind. Several team members followed, offering support, but I asked them to return. They couldn't afford to lose their jobs over my battle. That evening, Mark didn't come home. His Instagram showed him at Chez Laurent, our anniversary restaurant, with Stephanie. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings with someone who understands vision." I sat in our empty house, surrounded by 8 years of memories, and opened my laptop. While they celebrated, I discovered Mark had been transferring money from our joint accounts to offshore holdings in the Caymans. $50,000 here, $75,000 there. Over $600,000 of marital assets hidden away. I also found property records. He'd bought a condo in Stephanie's name using a company shell account. Fraud upon fraud, building a future with my money and her ambition. The divorce papers I'd found earlier made sense now. He planned to claim poverty-hiding assets while taking half of mine. The prenup protected him unless I could prove infidelity and financial fraud. I now had proof of both, but I wanted more than a clean divorce. I wanted justice. The next morning, I returned to the office wearing my best suit head high. Mark was there with Stephanie, her things being moved into an office next to his. They'd removed my nameplate from my door, replacing it with a temporary sign, under renovation. "Denise," Mark called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "HR needs to see you. Something about your behaviour yesterday." HR, the final step before termination, but I smiled. "Of course, but first Chairman Roberts asked to see me, said it was urgent." Mark's eyes narrowed. "Roberts? About what?" I couldn't say. I replied sweetly, then walked past them toward the executive floor. The seeds were planted, time to water them with truth. 3 weeks before the explosion, I stood in Chairman Roberts's private office at 7 a.m. before most employees arrived. Roberts was 71, had built this company from nothing, and despised nothing more than betrayal of trust. "Denise, your message concerned me deeply. These are serious allegations." I placed a leather portfolio on his desk. "Everything is documented here. Financial records, emails, security footage. I wouldn't come to you without absolute proof." He spent 40 minutes reviewing his expression, growing darker with each page. Finally, he looked up. "How long has this been going on?" "The affair 3 months, confirmed possibly longer. The financial fraud goes back 6 months. And you're just coming to me now." I needed ironclad evidence. One shot at this. Mark's been painting me as emotional and unstable to discredit anything I might say. Roberts leaned back, studying me. "What do you want, Denise?" "Justice. And the chance to continue contributing to this company without my personal life affecting my professional standing." "You're asking me to fire my CEO. I'm showing you why you need to. Check page 47. He flipped to it, finding Mark's plan to sell company secrets to a competitor once his golden parachute was secured. Stephanie was his courier, using her previous internship connections. "Jesus Christ," Roberts muttered. "Excuse my language. There's more. Jennifer from finance has concerns about irregularities she's found." As if on cue, Jennifer knocked and entered. Our CFO was usually unflappable, but she looked shaken. "Chairman Denise, I found something disturbing." She presented her findings. Mark had been funneling money through Stephanie's inflated bonuses and fake consulting fees. Over $2 million diverted in 6 months. The company could face SEC investigation if it continued. "He's paying her $70,000 monthly for strategic consulting on top of her salary," Jennifer explained. She submitted one report. It was plagiarized from a Harvard Business Review article. Roberts's jaw clenched. "Who else knows? Brad from IT has been helping us track digital trails," I said. "Margaret from HR has documented numerous complaints about Mark that he's suppressed." "Complaints?" Margaret entered next, carrying a box of files. 23 complaints in 8 months. Sexual harassment, abuse of power, creating hostile work environment. He threatened to fire anyone who pursued them. "Why didn't these reach me?" Roberts demanded. Mark restructured reporting lines. HR reports to him directly now, not to the board. The violation of corporate governance was the final straw. Roberts picked up his phone. "Emergency board meeting, 3 weeks from today. Tell them it's about CEO performance and company liability." Then he turned to us. "You 3 will present your findings. But until then, not a word. Act normal." "Can you do that, Denise?" Knowing what he's doing. "I've been doing it for months." "There's something else," Roberts said, his expression softening slightly. "The board's been discussing creating a chief strategy officer position. Someone to oversee long-term planning merge operations with vision. Interested." My heart skipped. CSO was a C-suite position equal to Mark in hierarchy. That would be incredible. Johnson Industries called yesterday. Margaret Johnson specifically requested you lead their account. Said the presentation was a disaster, but she trusts you to fix it. That's $100 million endorsement of your capabilities. The presentation Stephanie ruined had actually worked in my favor. Margaret Johnson saw through the chaos to the truth. Over the next 3 weeks, I became an actress worthy of an Oscar. I played the subdued wife, the humbled executive. I let Mark think he'd won. I even told him I was considering stepping down to a lesser role. "That's mature of you," he said one evening, magnanimous in his perceived victory. "Stephanie could learn from your grace in defeat." Grace in defeat. If only he knew. Meanwhile, our alliance grew. 4 board members quietly pledged support after reviewing evidence. The head of legal advised on criminal implications. Even Mark's assistant, tired of covering for his afternoon disappearances, provided his real calendar showing meetings that were hotel visits. Stephanie grew increasingly brazen, ordering my team around taking credit for their work. She moved into Mark's office for hours, door locked, emerging with smeared lipstick and his hair disheveled. The entire company knew, whispered, waited for something to break. The morning of the board meeting, I woke at 4 a.m. Mark was snoring beside me, secure in his empire. I dressed carefully, navy suit, minimal jewelry, the picture of professional competence. Before leaving, I looked at our wedding photo on the dresser. 2 ambitious people promising partnership. Only one had kept that promise. I arrived at the office early, placing information packets at each board member's seat. 47 pages of evidence, plus a USB drive with video files. Everything needed to end Mark's reign. At 8:59, 1 minute before the meeting, Mark strutted in with Stephanie. He'd actually brought her to a board meeting she had no right to attend. The arrogance was breathtaking. "Before we begin," Mark announced, "I want to formally announce Stephanie's promotion to Vice President of Strategic Initiatives." Several board members exchanged glances. Roberts cleared his throat. "Actually, Mark, we have a different agenda today." The trap was set. The prey had walked in willingly. Time to spring it shut. The boardroom at 9 a.m. was charged with tension that Mark in his arrogance completely missed. He sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. Stephanie beside him, with a fresh manicure and a designer dress I recognized from my own closet. She'd been in my home taking more than just my husband. "Whatever agenda you have can wait," Mark said dismissively to Roberts. "This VP announcement is critical for company morale." "Company morale," Roberts repeated slowly. "Yes, let's discuss that." He pressed a button and the screen behind Mark illuminated. The first slide read, "Emergency Review, CEO Performance and Fiduciary Violations." Mark's face drained of colour. "What is this?" "Sit down, Mark," Roberts commanded. "Denise, please begin." I stood remote in hand, my voice steady as steel. "Over the past 6 months, I've documented systematic fraud, embezzlement, and gross misconduct by our CEO." "This is ridiculous." Mark started to rise, but board member Harrison, former military, pointed him back to his seat. "You'll have your chance to respond. Continue, Denise." Click. Financial records appeared. $2.3 million embezzled through fraudulent consulting fees and inflated bonuses to Stephanie Morrison. Stephanie gasped. "Those were approved payments for my work." "What work?" I asked. "This report you submitted?" Click. "Plagiarized entirely from Harvard Business Review, published 3 years ago." Click. "Hotel receipts. 57 afternoon client meetings at the Ritz-Carlton. Strange how no clients ever attended." Click. "Security footage. Mark and Stephanie in the parking garage, the timestamp showing when he'd told me he was at an emergency investor call." "You've been spying on me," Mark sputtered. "Protecting company interests," I corrected. "Which brings us to this." Click. "The email about selling company secrets to competitors." The room erupted. "That's fake," Mark shouted. "She's fabricating everything because I chose Stephanie over her." "Chose?" Roberts asked quietly. "So you admit to the affair?" Mark's mouth opened closed, trapped by his own words. Jennifer stood next, presenting the financial evidence with surgical precision. Each fraudulent transaction traced, documented, proven. The board members who hadn't seen the preview looked increasingly horrified. Margaret from HR followed with her box of complaints. She read names, dates, incidents. 23 voices Mark had silenced now roaring through her steady recitation. Janet from accounting threatened with termination for refusing dinner invitations. Brad from sales demoted after questioning expense reports. The entire Phoenix team forced to work unpaid overtime while Mark billed their hours to phantom clients. "Those are disgruntled employees," Mark protested. "Denise has poisoned them against me." "I have signed affidavits," Margaret replied. "And recordings." She played one. Mark's voice threatening to destroy an employee's career if they didn't falsify numbers. The board member who'd been Mark's biggest supporter pushed back from the table in disgust. Brad from IT presented the digital trail. Deleted emails recovered showing Mark and Stephanie planning to gut the marketing department and replace it with Stephanie's sorority sisters. Messages about hiding assets, destroying evidence, and something that made my blood run cold even though I'd seen it before. He's been accessing board members' private emails, Brad revealed, using his admin privileges to read confidential communications. Robert stood slowly. You've been reading our emails. I needed to know who was loyal. Mark said, his arrogance finally cracking into desperation. Loyal, Roberts repeated. Let's discuss loyalty. Denise, tell them about Johnson Industries. Margaret Johnson called personally. Despite the sabotaged presentation, she wants to proceed with the $100 million contract, but only if I lead it. She also mentioned she's been approached by 3 other companies trying to poach me. I've declined them all out of loyalty to this organization. You went behind my back to clients, Mark accused. She called me at home. Unlike you, I maintain professional boundaries. Stephanie had been shrinking in her chair but suddenly stood. This is a witch hunt. You're all jealous of what Mark and I have. What you have, Roberts said coldly, is unemployment. Security. 2 guards entered. We'd arranged this beforehand. Mark Thompson, Stephanie Morrison, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your personal items will be mailed after legal review. You can't do this, Mark raged. I built this company. You inherited a position you've disgraced, Roberts replied. The board's vote was unanimous. Denise set me up. She's trying to steal my job. The Chief Strategy Officer position was already hers, Roberts announced. Approved yesterday in emergency session, she starts Monday. Mark lunged toward me, but security intervened. As they dragged him out, he screamed threats about lawsuits, revenge destroying me. Stephanie followed her designer heels, clicking frantically, mascara streaming down her face as reality hit. She'd lost everything for an affair with a soon-to-be criminal defendant. The boardroom fell silent after they left. Then slowly applause began. Not triumphant, but respectful. Recognition of justice served. Roberts approached me. The CSO transition will be smooth. Your new office is ready. Corner suite, northeast view. Better than Mark's. Better than I'd dreamed. That evening, the story broke. Someone, probably a vindictive board member, leaked to the press. Tech CEO ousted in embezzlement scandal. Mark's photo splashed across business sites. Stephanie named as co-conspirator. Their reputations destroyed in hours. My phone buzzed with messages. Employees celebrating competitors offering positions, Margaret Johnson sending champagne. But I sat alone in what was now just my house, feeling not victory, but relief. 8 years of marriage reduced to headlines and legal proceedings. But I'd survived. More than survived, I'd won. Mark's final check to me arrived the next day, the divorce settlement expedited due to criminal charges. Everything I was owed, plus damages. Stephanie's condo bought with stolen funds would be liquidated and returned to the company. Justice served cold, exactly as it should be. 6 months have passed since that boardroom showdown, and I barely recognize my life now. The transformation hasn't just been professional, though that alone would be remarkable. As Chief Strategy Officer, I've led initiatives that increased company valuation by 40%. The Johnson Industries deal expanded into a $200 million partnership spanning 3 years. Margaret Johnson and I have become more than business associates. She's become a mentor, sharing wisdom about navigating corporate leadership as a woman who refuses to diminish herself for anyone's comfort. The office culture changed dramatically after Mark's departure. The fear that had permeated every department evaporated, replaced by innovation and collaboration. I promoted Lisa, a brilliant strategist, who Mark had kept in an entry position because she'd refused his advances. She now leads the West Coast division. Brad from IT became our Chief Technology Officer, his loyalty and integrity finally rewarded. Margaret from HR restructured the entire department, implementing safeguards that would prevent another Mark from ever gaining such power. We created a mentorship program for young women in the company, something Stephanie ironically inspired. Not her behavior, but the vulnerability her ambition exposed. Young professionals need guidance to navigate corporate politics without compromising their integrity. The program pairs junior employees with senior mentors, teaching them that success doesn't require stepping on others or trading dignity for advancement. My personal life underwent even more dramatic changes. The divorce finalized quickly, Mark's criminal charges expediting what could have been a lengthy battle. He couldn't contest anything while facing federal fraud indictments. I received the house the investments and damages for emotional distress. The prenup he'd thought would protect him became irrelevant when criminal behaviour voids such agreements. Mark's fall from grace was complete and very public. The federal investigation revealed more than even I had discovered. 7 years of tax evasion, money laundering through shell companies and connections to insider trading. He faced 15 to 20 years in federal prison. His legal team, the best money could buy, couldn't spin away documented evidence and filmed confessions. Last I heard, he was trying to negotiate a plea deal offering information about other corrupt executives in exchange for reduced sentences. Stephanie's story became a cautionary tale whispered in business schools. Unable to find employment in any corporate setting, her degree worthless without references, she returned to her hometown. Someone sent me a photo of her working at a department store cosmetics counter. I felt no satisfaction seeing it, only pity for someone who'd confused manipulation with strategy, seduction with success. She'd aimed for the top by attaching herself to power, never understanding that borrowed influence evaporates the moment the source disappears. The universe has an interesting sense of humour, though. Last month I was at a conference when someone called my name. Mark's former assistant handed me a letter looking uncomfortable. He asked me to give this to you, from prison. I read it that night in my new penthouse apartment overlooking the lake I'd once viewed from a lesser angle. Mark's handwriting, once confident and bold, now trembled with desperation. He apologised, claimed he'd been corrupted by power, said Stephanie had seduced him. The blame shifting was pathetic but predictable. He ended by asking if I could write a character reference for his sentencing. I shredded the letter and made a donation to a women's professional development fund in the exact amount he'd embezzled. The tax write-off was satisfying. My dating life resumed slowly. Trust once shattered rebuilds carefully. Then Thomas appeared, referred by Margaret Johnson of all people, a cardiac surgeon with gentle hands and genuine laugh, who found my corporate war stories fascinating rather than intimidating. He appreciated strength wasn't threatened by success and understood that partnership meant equality, not ownership. "You're remarkable," he said on our 4th date, after I negotiated a complex acquisition over dinner without missing a beat of our conversation. My ex-husband found that threatening. Your ex-husband was an idiot. Simple, direct, true. We've been together 8 months now. He brings coffee to my office during his shifts, understanding when deals keep me late. I attend his hospital galas charming donors while he saves lives. We discuss our days over wine, 2 successful people building something based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. The media attention was intense initially. The executive who fought back became my unwanted tagline. Forbes featured me in their Women Leaders issue. Speaking invitations poured in from companies wanting to hear about recognizing and combating corporate corruption. I accepted select engagements, always emphasizing that survival isn't just about fighting back, but building something better from the ashes. The sweetest irony came last week. Roberts forwarded me an email with just one word: karma. Mark had applied for a junior analyst position at one of our competitors, using a fake resume that omitted his CEO role and criminal record. The hiring manager, a woman he'd once propositioned at a conference, recognized him immediately. She sent his application to every major company in the industry with a warning about attempted fraud. He was now completely unemployable in any legitimate business, his reputation poison, even after serving his eventual sentence. The company thrived under new leadership. Roberts promoted our COO to CEO, a steady hand who valued ethics over ego. We went public last month, the IPO exceeding projections by 30%. My stock options protected during the divorce made me wealthy beyond what I'd imagined when I was fetching coffee as a junior associate. But money wasn't the victory. The victory was walking into any boardroom and commanding respect earned through competence, not connections. It was mentoring young women who reminded me of myself before Mark, ambitious and eager, but also vulnerable to those who would exploit that ambition. It was building something lasting untainted by the corruption Mark had tried to normalize. Sometimes I drive past the prison where Mark's being held pending trial, not to gloat, but to remind myself of the price of compromising integrity for power. He had everything and threw it away for an affair with someone who saw him as a stepping stone. Stephanie had potential but wasted it pursuing shortcuts that led to dead ends. They deserved each other, 2 people who confused taking with earning power with leadership. Looking back now, the journey from that humiliating public apology to where I stand today feels both eternal and instant. The pain was real, cutting deep into places I didn't know could hurt. Betrayal by someone you've built a life with leaves scars that success doesn't erase, but transforms into wisdom. I learnt that strength isn't about never breaking, but about how you rebuild afterward. Those first nights alone in our house, surrounded by ghosts of a marriage that had become a battlefield, I wondered if the pain would ever fade. It did, gradually replaced not by bitterness, but by understanding. Mark hadn't suddenly become cruel. I'd finally stopped excusing cruelty disguised as ambition. Stephanie wasn't special. She was simply the latest in what I now realized had been a pattern I'd chosen to ignore. The therapy helped more than I initially wanted to admit. Dr. Catherine, recommended by Margaret from HR, specialized in professional women recovering from both personal and professional betrayal. She helped me understand that my drive to succeed hadn't caused Mark's betrayal. It had threatened his need for superiority. His affair wasn't about Stephanie's youth or beauty, but about finding someone who would never challenge his narrative of being the smartest person in every room. "You didn't lose anything real," Dr. Catherine said during one session. "You escaped an illusion that was slowly poisoning you." She was right. The marriage I mourned had never existed. I'd been in love with potential, with the partnership Mark promised, but never delivered. Every success I achieved became a threat to his ego. Every accomplishment a reminder that he hadn't earned his position through merit alone, but through manipulation and strategic relationships. My support system revealed itself in unexpected ways. Female executives from other companies reached out, sharing their own stories of professional betrayal and personal triumph. A sisterhood of survivors who'd navigated similar storms and emerged stronger. We formed an informal network meeting monthly for dinners where we discussed everything from market strategies to managing gaslighting partners. These women became my board of directors for life decisions, offering advice, seasoned with experience and genuine care. The legal proceedings dragged on, but each hearing brought revelations that validated my actions. Mark had been planning to frame me for the embezzlement, creating false documentation that would have destroyed my career while he started fresh with Stephanie. The evidence I'd gathered didn't just save me. It revealed the depth of calculated cruelty I'd been living with. The man who'd promised to build an empire with me had been planning to build it on my professional corpse. Through all of this, I discovered something profound about forgiveness. I forgave myself first for not seeing the signs earlier, for believing love could overcome fundamental character flaws, for staying when my instincts screamed to leave. That forgiveness wasn't weakness, but recognition that I'd done my best with the information I had. I'd tried to save a marriage that was already dead, performed CPR on something that had flatlined long before Stephanie arrived. Forgiving Mark was different. Not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger was like carrying poison meant for someone else. I forgave him the way you forgive a natural disaster, acknowledging the damage, while refusing to let it define your future. He was a chapter in my story, not the entire book. His choices were his burden to carry through whatever conscience he had left. The professional growth transcended any position or salary. I learned to lead without domination, to build consensus, without sacrificing vision, to mentor, without creating dependence. The programs we implemented weren't just about preventing future Marks, but about creating environments where talent thrived on merit rather than manipulation. Every policy change, every cultural shift was a small victory against the toxic dynamics that had nearly destroyed not just me, but the entire organization. My relationship with Thomas taught me what partnership actually looked like. Disagreements that led to discussions, not declarations. Success celebrated rather than diminished. Independence within togetherness. He had his world of medicine. I had my corporate sphere, and we created a third space where both existed without competition. When I received an offer to speak at an international leadership conference, he rearranged his surgery schedule to accompany me, sitting in the front row as I discussed strategic resilience. His pride was genuine, untainted by comparison to his own achievements. The ripple effects continued spreading. 3 companies revised their HR policies after hearing my story. 2 CEOs were quietly removed after investigations inspired by our case revealed similar patterns. A business ethics course at Northwestern now uses our scandal as a case study in governance, failure, and recovery. Professor Williams, who taught me corporate strategy all those years ago, called to say she was proud of how I'd applied those lessons in the real world. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in how I viewed success itself. It wasn't about titles or salaries, though; those had their place. True success was building something sustainable, creating value that extended beyond quarterly reports. It was seeing Lisa excel in her new role, watching Brad's innovations transform our technology infrastructure, receiving messages from young women who'd found courage in my story to leave toxic situations or stand up to workplace harassment. Every morning I wake up in my penthouse, watching sunrise paint the lake gold, and feel profound gratitude, not for the view or the position, but for the journey that brought me here. The pain had been real, but so was the growth. The betrayal had been devastating, but the recovery had been transformative. I keep one photo from my marriage tucked in a drawer rather than displayed. It's from our wedding day, both of us laughing at something off camera. I keep it not from nostalgia, but as a reminder that even beautiful beginnings can have ugly endings if built on unequal foundations. That young woman in white believed in fairy tales. The woman I am now writes her own story one, where the heroine saves herself and builds a kingdom based on integrity rather than illusion. When young professionals ask for advice, I tell them this: never apologize for someone else's insecurity. Document everything when something feels wrong. Build alliances with people who value ethics over advancement. Trust your instincts. They're usually detecting danger your conscious mind hasn't recognized yet. And most importantly, remember that losing someone who doesn't value you isn't a loss, but a liberation. The last I heard, Mark was still fighting legal battles from his prison cell, his resources drained by lawyers who knew a losing case when they saw one. Stephanie had married someone from her hometown, probably spinning stories about her brief time in the corporate world that bore no resemblance to reality. Their story ended exactly as it should have, with consequences matching their choices. Mine continues each chapter better than the last because I'm finally the sole author. No ghostwriters, no editors trying to diminish my voice. Just me creating something authentic and powerful. The view from the top isn't just about altitude, it's about perspective. And from where I stand now, I can see clearly that everything that felt like destruction was actually construction, building a life that no one can take away because it's founded on truth rather than manipulation. The girl who stood in that office being forced to apologize to her husband's mistress would be amazed at where that humiliation led. Not to defeat, but to victory. Not to endings, but to beginnings. Not to silence, but to a voice that now speaks for those still finding theirs. So to anyone watching who's trapped in a situation where you're being diminished, manipulated, or betrayed by someone who should protect and support you, know this: the pain you're feeling is temporary, but the strength you're building is permanent. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Build your allies. And when the moment comes to stand up for yourself, remember that you deserve respect in all relationships, professional and personal. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success that speaks louder than any confrontation. It's building something better from the ashes of what someone else burned down. It's becoming someone they could never have imagined you'd be, because they were too busy trying to make you small. I lost a husband but found myself, and that trade was worth everything. I traded a false partnership for true leadership manipulation, for integrity, illusion, for reality. Now when I walk into boardrooms, no one questions my presence. When I speak, people listen not because of who I married, but because of what I've built. And when I go home at night, it's to a life constructed on my terms, with people who value strength rather than fear it. The empire Mark promised to build with me, I built it myself, better than anything his limited imagination could have conceived. And unlike his, built on fraud and betrayal, mine stands on foundations that will last long after both our names are forgotten. A testament to what's possible when you refuse to let someone else's insecurity define your potential. What challenges are you facing in your own relationships or workplace? Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to diminish your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of triumph over betrayal. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's inability to see it. Stay strong, trust yourself, and never apologize for being extraordinary.